My friends, what lays before you is the myriad knowledge of an unfathomable universe. Join our intrepid remembrancers as they explore the heresy as history. From deep within the farthest reaches of the great library of Tisca, we are the Heresy Grad School. So said the War Master in his wisdom. Go forth, my sons, and illuminate them.
Do it.
Yeah, right. So, Jason, is your cat out of your bits box yet?
Well, he's quieted down at least.
Oh, good.
Back in.
Sleeping in the big bits box.
That's gotta get pokey, right?
I don't know. It's weird, man. They like that times.
Alright, well, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Heresy Grad School. We're, kind of just finishing up our coverage on the Thousand Sons, or pre-Heresy, Pre-Prospero Thousand Sons, and just kind of, we're taking it easy this episode. I think, Jason described it best as this is kind of like your post-exam episode, or your post-thesis presentation episode. We're just hanging out and chatting a little bit.
Like when your professor says, hey, I know we got that one weird, class scheduled after the exam. Show up and you'll get 5 extra credit points.
And we'll watch, like, Forrest Gump or something like that.
Yeah, that's what this episode is.
Awesome.
Oh, and by the way, speaking of grad school stuff, this is a little pat on the back for me, but I just got accepted into my grad degree program with information systems. So, boom, real world connotations with grad school. There you go.
You're all official now.
Yeah, right?
All 3 of us are official.
So I think, Dave, you want to cover one of these exemplary battles in Book 7, right?
Yeah, definitely, because I think, Jason and I, and Pat, you too, we all sort of did the deep dive into the lore on what information was out there for the Thousand Sons before their unification with Magnus, or reunification with Magnus. And it's funny because, I don't know, Pat, if you said this, but somebody said was like, and then there was Magnus, right? So there's just not a lot of lore out there, at least that we could find. So I am going to read one of the exemplary battles from Book 7. It's on page 156. It's one of the ones that I didn't get to in our last 3 episodes, and I thought it would be a fitting way to sort of end the little series tonight. And then so we can talk about it afterward. All right, so this is the Aceridine Defiance on page 156 in Book 7, Inferno. This was one of the 15th Legion's first engagements after its foundation. Aceridine was the dominant enclave on the human-colonized world of Castus, which lay close to the Sol system. The world had surrendered and submitted to compliance after only a cursory engagement with the forces of the Great Crusade, and had swiftly been turned into a temporary staging node from which the Great Crusade forces launched deeper into the unknown. Castus was a world of feudal warriors who fought with weapons passed down to them out of the darkness of the Age of Strife. Divided into 100 enclaves, each led by a warrior chieftain, they existed in a state of constant, low-grade conflict. Proud and direct, many of them were immediately gathered into the various arms of the Great Crusade fleets and sent to conquer other planets in the name of the Master of Mankind. A blood price for each warrior was paid by the Imperium to their families in an echo of the mercenary traditions that existed on Castus long before their sons and daughters went to fight wars for the new emperor. For a brief time, all seemed well. Forces flowed through Castus and scattered to the stars. The warriors of the 100 enclaves gathering in their archeo armor to make a blood contract to the Imperium before boarding the landing ships which dotted Castus. Not all on Castus submitted to the yoke of their new masters willingly, however. To some, the old traditions of blood service and honor had been subverted, and they saw the Imperium which they were now part of as little more than a parasite draining them of strength. Chief amongst these dissenters was Acilia Geter, chieftain of the Aceridine Enclave. A year after the compliance of Castus, Geter renounced her oath to the emperor, calling on those born of Castus to do the same. The heads of 100 iterators, officials, and garrison troops were taken to mark the beginning of her war. The rebellion spread across Castus with the speed of a fire across plains of dry grass. While many of Castus's warriors had been drawn off to fight in the Great Crusade, many remained, and they were formidable. Their strongholds were constructed of plasma-tempered metal. Their armor could turn all but the most potent weapons, and while the Age of Strife had taken much, it had left them with the mysteries of power field generators, plasma channeling, and much more besides. Caught off guard, the Imperium's presence on Castus took heavy casualties in the first night of the uprising. Seeing her bloody work, more enclaves rose to Gader's call, and for a short time it seemed that Castus would fall. But the Imperium could not allow such a vital world to be lost, and could not let such defiance stand. The 15th Expeditionary Fleet, bound for Castus, was retasked to put the rebellion down and restore the rule of peace. Chief amongst this force's troops were the 1st Brigade of the 2nd Regiment of the 15th Legion. Planned and coordinated by the 15th, the Imperium's rebuke to the rebels was swift and devastating. The full Expeditionary Fleet's forces dropped onto the surface of Castus within the space of 10 minutes. Orbital bombardment lit the sky with a torrent of flame and actinic light as drop pods and gunships fell through the columns of macro shells and turbolaser torrents. All struck the strongholds of those who had first risen in rebellion and reduced them to burned ruins and their garrisons to heaps of corpse sacks. Such an action, while spectacular, was not remarkable amongst the legions Astartes, and would not be a matter of note if it was not the context for what was to follow. The Assaridine enclave did not fall in the first assault. It seems likely that Gader had prepared for her rebellion and the certain punitive action that would be taken against her. By reinforcing both her stronghold's walls and augmenting its defenses with power shield generators and slaved gun turrets, 50 legionnaires of the 15th Legion and 1,000 human troops of the Imperial Army Auxiliary had descended on the enclave, but had failed to breach its defenses. In the face of such resistance, many others would have withdrawn or called in a sudden surge of reinforcements to break them. The 15th did neither of these. Across Castus, the spread-out forces of the 15th began to alter their battle tactics. In places, some simply crushed the enemy, facing them to withdraw to their gunships. In others, they stayed their hand and began to offer terms to rebel leaders at the price of immediate and unquestioning service. Forces began to move, peeling away from engagements at the precise moment when victory was assured but not yet taken, leaving the exact strength of force required to press their victory home. Over the course of hours, the Imperium's forces began to circle the Assaridine enclave. Messages began to reach Gader and the other enclaves falling or surrendering. Calls from her former allies reached her, pleading with her to surrender. Doubts started to murmur between some of her entourage. Then the bombardment began to fall from the sky. It caged the enclave's defenses, lashing it with a fury that blinded all who looked at it directly. Then, as swiftly as it had begun, it ended, and at that exact moment the first assault hit the outer walls. Gader responded, rushing troops from where they had sheltered. The attack vanished, and another began at the same instant, then another. The shields began to fail, and then as one, the Imperium's forces withdrew. The hammer of orbital fire descended on the enclave and broke it open. The gunships of the 15th flew into the breach so close to the last blast of the bombardment that it is said it seemed as if they were one. Gader died by her own hand before she could be taken, but the rest of her bloodline were sent to the death mines of Chthonia. And that's it.
Well, damn.
Yeah, did I read that before?
No, you did read the leveling of 72-9 though.
Okay.
I believe. Yeah.
Cool. But I didn't read the Assaridine Defiance.
No.
Okay, good. Fuck, man, the whole time I was reading that, I was like, this...
So, I gotta be... Dude, we go through these books so often, like, not on the cast per se, but just like, you know, we have our lore stuff spread out all over our offices, our work areas, just reading, you know.
And we talk about stuff before the cast here, you know?
This is true.
Yeah.
The Mechanicum part of my brain saw like the archaeotech and like the mysteries of plasma field generators and plasma channeling, and I was like, I wonder if they ever talk about like the Mechanicum wanting those STCs, but I guess in this case, this is the only time it's mentioned. But
What was really interesting to me about this is it doesn't give the date of the compliance. Doesn't give the compliance a date, but it does say that it was one of the first human colonized worlds which lay outside and close to the Sol system. So I went out and tried to find Castus, and of course couldn't find anything like Castus outside of the Sol system. A little bit like what we were talking about with the warp witches of Gathora, right?
Right.
It's just this really juicy piece of lore. One of the first engagements that the 15th Legion has outside of the Sol system. I mean, this is really early on, right? And so, just wanted there to be more, and it was awesome. But yeah.
Well, there you go, listeners. This may be your post-exam episode, but you still got homework. Find us the Castus system, and we're talking about it's page 156 in book 7, and just go take a look.
How badass is that last line too, right? So Getir, this warrior chieftain, right, from the sort of the Age of Strife. She's got this archaeotech. She doesn't really know how it works, but she kind of, she knows how to use it. So she resists, and then the Thousand Sons just fucking crush her, right? And crush all of the sort of the warrior chieftains. The, what do they call them?
The enclaves?
Yeah, the 100 enclaves, right?
Right. Well, they're either crushed or they have to swear fealty,
Right. But check this out. The rest of her bloodline were sent to the death mines of Chthoniya. So that's the punishment, right? It's not just that they weren't executed. They were sent to the death mines of Chthoniya. And I feel like this is very much like the Emperor's hand at work here, right? This is early compliance tactics. This is I'm not going to simply, do direct punitive extermination, right? I'm going to take your bloodline specifically and send them to basically a death camp. It's pretty fucking horrific when you think about it. But yeah, this was the early days of the Great Crusade, guys.
Well, that kind of echoes something the Emperor used to do pretty often, doesn't it?
Like during the Unification Wars, Jason?
It's you remember the very beginning of Master of Mankind?
Yes.
How he basically, he has Valdor wipe out this woman's entire little empire, and the only person left out of that entire line was her infant son, who he then abducts.
That was Ra, right?
Yeah.
And that was for the crime of draining the last ocean.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and he totally wipes out her bloodline. Yeah, you're absolutely right, man. It's very kind of it's very primitive in the sense that it seems like in all of the Warhammer 40,000 fiction, and I'm including the Heresy in this, right? This is sort of this world. This world is very much a dynastic, clannish, tribal bloodline. It matters where you're from, and there's so much that draws on that, and I don't know, it's really cool, and it's sort of creepy at the same time.
I mean, if you look at the Heresy, both the traitors and the loyalists didn't trust the Terran legionnaires they had in their legion.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Depends on the legion, though.
Well, true, but the majority of them, didn't, because for some reason the Terran ones in loyalist legions felt closer to Horus because, well, they were never accepted in their legion, and for some reason the Terran legionnaires in the Horus side, or heretic side, depending on how you see it, were more loyal to the Emperor because they were originally from Terra. you know?
But then you've got legions like the Night Lords, where the Terran Marines and a lot of the Nostraman Marines got along famously.
Well, fine. Just poke a hole in my bubble, why don't you, Jason? I'm gonna go.
To be fair, the Night Lords were pretty weird.
Yeah, that they are pretty weird. No offense to Night Lord players, but y'all got a weird legion.
A little offense.
I mean,
to be fair, we're all Thousand Sons players, and Sevatar did call Araman, and I quote, an arrogant Terran shithead. So there's that.
I mean, yeah, I could see that.
Speaking of Airmen, right? So this whole I guess we've been doing this for almost a month now, right? At least 3 episodes. This might be our 4th.
No, this is our 5th episode, by the way.
Is this our 5th? Okay, so we're sort of closing a chapter on the Thousand Sons, but we will be back, right? But so I've been in this weird dimension of Thousand Sons, right? So I've been reading The Solar War. I've been listening to Talons of Horus, which is Aaron Dembski-Bowden's sort of introduction to the Black Legion, but it's bizarrely focused on a Thousand Sons character named Kion. And, I won't spoil it because it's an amazing novel that everybody should read. And I've been doing this, right? So it's this weird, Thousand Sons, confluence, right? So it's all about the Thousand Sons because in the Solar War, which I also won't spoil because I know a lot of people haven't had a chance to dig into that yet.
Just graze over the top.
But I will graze over the top and say that the Thousand Sons are back, and they play a huge. John French really does them credit in the Solar War. So you get to see them again in the Heresy, really for the first time since Prospero burned, right? So they sort of just disappeared. They went on the crazy acid trip through the warp to find sort of the fragments of Magnus. That's Graham McNeil's, the Crimson King, right? Onwards. But really, as a Legion and, as Astartes, the first time you really see them back in the Imperium is the Solar. And so it's been really cool. It's been really cool to see that, and then the Talons of Horus, and then reading the Thousand Sons. I get lost sometimes. It's weird.
Yeah, you're kind of in the 3 different stages of Thousand Sons. You're dealing with the Pre-Prospero, which is what we've been covering, and then you've got the Heresy, which is Solar War, and then you've got your the 40K, which is post-scouring into Legion Wars,
Yeah, and I know Jason's sort of right there with me. I mean, you've read Talons of Horus, right, Jason?
Oh, of course. It's my favorite 40K novel.
Would you agree with me in that I think really more than any other Legion, the Thousand Sons really, I think they have the constant thread that sort of links them throughout, right? They don't go through any kind of massive transformation as far as I know.
I mean, there's the Armon bullshit, but yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, so a physical transformation, that's true.
But
they do kind of retain the same themes throughout. I'll give you that. It's actually kind of a good point. Once you're done with Talons of Horus, you should immediately start in on Black Legion, the sequel novel, because I know they teased it a whole lot about, because everybody knew it was the book where Abaddon comes through on the first Black Crusade and kills Sigismund, and you hear that and you think, well, I know at least I did, and a lot of my, a lot of folks I talked to did. You think, like, how could that be anything other than a fight where Abaddon just kills Sigismund and, that's it?
But 300 pages of Abaddon killing Sigismund.
Yeah, I mean...
I'd listen to that book.
Yeah.
It's about 40 pages, I think. Like, the entire assault on Sigismund's flagship. But if people were so irritated, especially, Loyalist players, because it's like, oh, it's going to be just this big Abaddon fan fiction. They're going to try and make him seem cool, even though he failed at Black Crusading 13 times, and doesn't have any arms, fail Abaddon. But it's like it's so much more than that. And what's impressive is how it definitely, it's like Kion is moving through some of the most major points in the history of, I mean, it's the first time actual Chaos Marines step forth from the Eye of Terror back into the Imperium. And for them, it's been decades, a couple hundred years since the Heresy, but it's been 10,000 years on the outside of the Eye. And it's like a staggering difference from what they're used to. And it's just as weird for them coming out of the Eye as it is for the Imperial Fists, or the Black Templars now, to see like what's been, what Chaos Marines are after what's to them 10,000 years. It's like the Heresy is essentially like 1,000 years old at this point.
Yeah, I think it's telling that, Aaron Dembski Bowden chose Kion to essentially be the narrator for the story of the Black Legion, right? So how you tell the story of the Black Legion, you've got to tell it through somebody's eyes. You can't obviously tell it through a mortal's eyes. No mortal would be able to sort of, be credible. But so he chose Kion, and then, he's a Thousand Sons sorcerer of enormous power, maybe only second to Arlon. We don't really know, but he certainly sounds like it.
He was the man that brought Magnus to his knees.
Right, and so that's just so cool. It's chilling, right? Mm-hmm. But he retains this sense of humanity, and I think that's the most telling thing about the Thousand Sons is they're the legion that, for all their faults, for all their hubris, maybe, I think they're the least, at least in my mind, they're the least guilty, right? And sort of like when you look at the word bearers and these guys they just sort of went all in, right? They're like balls deep. They're like
Sons of Horus did nothing wrong. I don't know what you're talking about.
Both feet first.
And I mean, just the Third Legion, total debauchery. And it's just, you look at some of these other legions and you're like, there was a point at which they could have chosen, right? The massacre at Istvan. But the Thousand Sons never got that chance. They never had the moment of the massacre at Istvan where sort of the ones that were going to be divided were divided and the other ones were sort of...
I mean, the rout came to town is essentially what happened.
Yeah.
Well, see, here's
their
the
hand
thing,
was forced.
Because any loyalist trying to rationalize it is going to say that Nicaea was like their philosophical Istvan, and they chose to ignore the Emperor's edict and keep doing all their space nerd witchery.
Yeah, but they were doing it on Prospero, and they weren't hurting anybody, They were just sort of,
See, I think in the opposite direction. I mean, we can all essentially agree that the Emperor's imperial truth was crap. But
yeah, that's pretty true.
Nicaea seems like it seems like one of those old school spy movies where, somebody gets too close to the truth and a shadowy government agency has to shut them down or, turn them in a different direction to get them off the trail. And that's what Nicaea always seemed like to me. It was like, oh, Magnus is getting too close to that bullshit. Gotta turn him around before he figures out some stuff I don't want him to.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jason. And it also, when you listen to sort of the Council of Nicaea and the way it's described, it's really like the Emperor didn't have a choice, right? Like his hand was forced. He didn't want to sanction Magnus. He didn't want to sanction the Thousand Sons. He would have been much happier if they had just sort of, remained sort of a clandestine, force that was operating away from the other legions. But it's like, yeah, when, 6 of the fucking 20 or 18 Primarchs kind of call you on the carpet, and you've got Mortarion and Dorn and the others, really railing against. And so you need those guys too, and you don't really want to explain the warp, this is the Emperor, right? I'm just trying to figure this out, and you don't really want to explain the warp. You're like, okay, go get Magnus and bring him back. I'm gonna have a talk to him. I'm gonna sit him down. I'm gonna tell him some stuff. It's gonna be okay. It's obviously not how it played out.
Yeah.
To be fair, though, Dorn and Mortarion also turned out to be staggering hypocrites when it came to... Mortarion ends up making pacts with demons because he figures out, like, oh, everybody else is doing it. I got to jump on that train, too. After he specifically was one of the strongest voices against Magnus. Leman Russ, of course, like, oh, it's not warp magic, it's power from Fenris. I mean, you can imagine the hand motion I'm making when I say that.
Look, they're using runes. That has nothing to do with anything.
Doesn't count. But no, then you've got Dorn, who is perhaps like the staunchest. Like, he locks up every one of his librarians in, baby jail.
Fucking insanity.
Doesn't. But the second he hits. All right, have you guys read Chamber at the End of Memory yet?
No.
I want to read that.
It's a phenomenal short story. It's in one of those Primarch compilations. I'm not sure if it's Scions of the Emperor or Sons of the Emperor, one of the two. But it's in there, and I'm not going to spoil it, but Dorn finds a psychically charged sort of chamber, like a big arcane jail sort of thing, in the walls of Terra, and the first thing he does is, this smells like psychic witchery. Grab me a librarian from baby jail and bring him here. So it's like, it's such bullshit political grandstanding.
It is. But and it's that's the tragedy of the heresy, right? And so when you listen to some of the Black Library authors sort of talk about this, this is the inevitable tragedy. Is this had to play out? And it's really funny that you mentioned the Dorn locking up his librarians, literally locking them up for decades. Because I just got to that part which is very interesting, because he's coming, he's sort of coming to grips with his own really sort of literal interpretation of that edict and his puritanical nature. Right? Just very Dorn is. It would be interesting if we see Dorn, just because I've said this before about Gilliman, right? Like, Gilliman in the 42nd millennia, right, in the Dark Imperium, is way more interesting than Gilliman in the, right? Just nuanced. He's got depth. It's like he's sort of been through.
He has feeling and he understands the world, kind of thing. Like,
he's sort of been through that, sort of.
He was a freshman in the Heresy. He's now a graduate law professor, and what have you.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, that is. I am kind of slowly slogging my way through Dark Imperium right now, but that is a really, really good point they touch on. Is Gilliman admits when he comes back, he's like, "Wow, during the Heresy and the Scouring, I almost started a second civil war with Dorn, and even though I got my way, this whole chapter deal was kind of a mistake. My whole Legion organization structure was doing all right, but this whole breakup into chapters and how I organized the Imperium, he essentially is thinking to himself, wow, 10,000 years of stagnation and ridiculous bureaucracy is kind of a byproduct of how I left things."
But so, it's kind of interesting that you mentioned that, and I know we're kind of going off on tangents with books, but
I mean, what else are we going to do on the wrap-up episode?
This is going to be a 40K spoiler, so close your ears or skip ahead an extra couple minutes if you haven't read the Beast Arise series. That includes you too. But so in that series, this is post-Scouring, probably during the Legion Wars, maybe, but it's Loyalist side, so none of the Legion War shit is actually happening. But they go and find Vulcan, and they bring him back to Terra because they need him to help destroy this orc menace that is essentially threatening all of human existence. And he comes to Terra and he's like, "My God, what has happened to Terra? What is this bureaucratic bullshit?"
It's not great.
Yeah,
it's not a good look.
And actually, I haven't read the one book that he shows up to Terra in a while, but if I remember correctly, he does blame Gilliman for this.
Nerd.
Pat, is he the last Loyalist Primarch before they all go dark?
I think so because at the end of that series, again, spoilers, skip ahead a couple minutes. At the end of that series, he vanishes while fighting the great war boss of the Beast, so to speak, of
Yeah.
this giant orc army. So, because they go back to
Interesting.
Olenor. So, fun fact. Um, yeah, no, there's so many little similarities, and the thing is we don't even know if the authors realize it. Like, it's just
I would like
amazing
to
you can
think they
find.
do.
Yeah, but I mean,
I would
you
like
were
to think they're
noting,
way smarter than us.
but we had this conversation on Tuesday. You found a picture of pre-Heresy Thousand Sons armor, right?
Oh, right, with the Sarum pattern helmet.
Yeah.
Yeah, fun fact, Thousand Sons apparently have access to the Forge World Sarum.
Well, tell Jason, tell the listeners where you found it, so they don't freak out.
Alright, so, uh, I can't remember what page it's on, but it's the old school Index Astartes books published, back circa, I think, 2001 or so. So you've got a good 15 years of separation between those and, the first couple of Black books. In the Thousand Sons article of Legionis Astartes, I think it's 3, they have a picture of, a pre-heresy Thousand Son. So he's got dark red and he's got white trim on his shoulder guards. But what's interesting is his helmet is almost an identical match for that World Eater from Book 1 that has all Mark II plate, except for his Sarum pattern helmet. They're nigh on identical, and it's kind of entertaining to see them like side by side and how similar they are.
So I know it's a design thing, but I still think I pointed this out. This is kind of more of a funny point out, but the red armor, it's more of an O face, and the white armor is more of an Ah face, considering they're world eaters. Just saying.
Yeah, but they're 15 years apart. I mean,
We should definitely post pictures of that if we can.
Oh, yeah.
Pat.
Yep.
But yeah, no, I think this is sort of indicative of the evolution of the story, and I think there's a certain amount of I don't want to call it historical revisionism because I think that sort of has a negative connotation, but I think what it is really it's going back in and sort of like adding detail to the story, right? It's like it's blowing it out. It's saying, well, yeah, absolutely, there were different marks of armor, and I think that's where we get the Achaea pattern armor, right, of the Thousand Sons. Obviously there was an emphasis from Forge World and the design team there to make the Thousand Sons very unique, and they have their own pattern of armor, the Achaea pattern of armor, and I think maybe that's where it comes from because. Jason, that was 15 years ago in what it was an Index Astartes.
yes.
Yeah, so like in a White Dwarf, I think it was the first time we saw the Crimson Thousand Sons color
Right.
scheme. Yeah,
Because the Index Astartes were just compilations of the White Dwarf articles on the actual Space Marine channel.
yeah, for sure. If you guys could pick those up, they're definitely worth it.
They
Oh, yeah.
are the best, and I am happy I did.
Yeah, for sure. And just not having to have 15 years of White Dwarf. The White Dwarfs are amazing, especially if you go back 15 years ago. But it's a lot of paper to keep around. But yeah, man, I don't know, guys. What do you think? You want to talk a little bit about where we're going next, or?
Yeah, let's go ahead and just, talk about where we're headed to, and, we obviously meant for this all to be like Pre-Prospero Thousand Sons. We'll probably be back with,
With Thousand Sons?
with
Oh,
Thousand Sons. Yeah,
we'll
just
definitely
plain
be
Thousand
back.
Sons.
Oh yeah, we'll definitely be back. Maybe not right away, but we'll definitely be.
But yeah. So, I don't know, where are we thinking about heading now, guys?
Well, so I wanted to do a quick look at the navigators, right? So the
That's
Nobilis
right.
Nobilis Navigate, right? So one of the I mean, they're such a critical part of really the Imperium from its very early onset. The Great Crusade would not have been possible without. They're a fascinating part of the lore. They're a fascinating part of or the literature, and they don't get to lot. So the navigators are always sort of they're there because they have to be because you got to navigate the warp. But I think recently they've been getting a lot more traction. You know, Pat. I think and Jason. I think you look at some of the novels that have come out through the Horus Heresy, The Outcast Dead, and just really a lot of the novels now give the navigators a lot more agency, right? They're this huge force sort of behind the scenes, right? In a lot of the story that we love, and I want to take a look at that and see what that's all about.
Yeah, I mean, and I gotta be honest, like we were talking about this earlier, and you know, you don't see them on the table either. And I know we primarily focus on lore, and the main cast kind of just goes over, units and rules and what's new coming out and how to paint and that kind of stuff. But I feel like, these guys deserve some table time. And I potentially have a navigator that might be coming with me to Nova, debating on throwing him in my ZM list just for some flair. See what happens,
That's so cool, man. I think everybody who plays ZM, if you're doing a boarding action of any kind, you should have a navigator. Can you do that? Is that cool? Pat, is that even is that kosher? Can you do that?
I mean, I'm pretty sure you can add him to any unit, but you know what? We're gonna save that. We're
Okay.
we'll talk about that.
We'll come back next episode and let you know.
Exactly.
Because I know Forge World has a model, and they have, I don't know if they're legit or experimental rules, but...
Nope, they're legit rules. Yeah.
Oh, fucking, are they really?
Yeah, dude.
Dude, I need to
go to forgeworld.com. Go to their downloads. Expeditionary Navigator.
Oh, that's so
Boom. Good. And they count as either an agent of the Emperor or agent of the War Master, so it worked.
So literally anybody who's playing ZM, traitor or loyalist, can take a navigator. And you 100% do that.
And you take them as an HQ choice. So, but not a compulsory. So, for all you hopefuls out there. And we'll go over their stats and their lore next episode. But, that's just a little feeler, a little taster for all you guys out there and gals.
I think the other thing we wanted to give you guys a heads up on is sort of like a read ahead, since we're talking about the Navis Nobilitite. Am I saying that right?
Navis Nobility? Or maybe? I don't know.
The Navigators. The
Navigators.
Navigator houses.
That's how they say it in the Black Book, or the Black Library books, is Navis Nobility.
Oh, well, there we go.
Okay, cool. So there's a lot of lore out there, but it's not actually in the what you would think of as the normal channels, right? So like the Black Library or the Forge World or the 40K.
Are these approved readings?
They are, Pat, because they were written by Alan Bly, Andy Hoare, Andy Chambers. So what we're alluding to, guys, is the vast repository of lore that's out there through the the Dark Heresy. Help me out here, man.
Are you talking about the Fantasy Flight RPG era?
Yeah, exactly.
So Dark Heresy, Black Crusade, and Only War and Rogue Trader.
Rogue Trader.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know for a fact, Rogue Trader, Alan Bly had a hand in writing that. Andy Hoare had a hand in writing that, and so a lot of I think the source material we will be referencing in the upcoming episode or episodes, depending on how far down the rabbit hole we go. So we'll allude to that, and so if you guys can find it, it's fascinating source material, and it's, in my mind, completely legitimate because of the folks that helped author it.
I mean, yeah, and yeah. I think between Dave and I, we've got almost all of the Rogue Trader and, the majority of Dark Heresy, as well as I'm currently trying to find all the different tomes for Black Crusade, but there's so much lore and just so much content in there just to read. Never mind, playing the game, but yeah.
Yeah, but it's very cool, and looking forward to sort of talking about it and sort of going a little bit off the reservation, talking about navigators because, hey, I mean, up until this point, I think, guys, we've only talked about Space Marines and Mortals, so we're going to talk about something kind of in between now.
Yeah, I think we need to take a break from Legions and just spread out y'all's horizons.
Like that 12 episodes that we did on Mechanica?
You shut your whore mouth.
So good.
But I
So
mean,
good.
maybe from here we'll go into the psychic unknown,
Spoopy.
very spooky. But one of the things I know I definitely want to talk about with this episode is Patreon. And I know everybody's seen that our Patreon's up. Thank you all to all the people who are now patrons. So there's some big things Heresy Grad School wise that are actually going to be coming down the pipe very soon, mind you. So we're gonna open up once we have 10 patrons at our top tier, which I think Jesse actually renamed all of our tiers, but I think it's the Legion Praetor tier. We're going to be opening up a new option with Heresy Grad School. So all patrons from the console level, which is tier 2, to the Praetor level, which is our top tier, are now going to have the ability to vote for monthly minisode topics for the Heresy Grad School. So we'll provide you guys with maybe 3 options, maybe more, for y'all to vote on, and whichever one you pick, we'll do a minisode of it, and we'll post it up that month. But also with the top tiers, once we hit those 10 top tiers, we then put them all in a pool, and you and someone from that pool will be chosen at random to either you guys can come and just chat with us during a normal episode, or you can come work with us and we can flesh out a topic and we'll cover it with you. So those are kind of the cool things that are coming down the pipe. I know a couple people have been asking me about, hey, when are we going to get Heresy Grad School tiers? Well, bam, here's what's going down. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm super excited to kind of like hang out with some folks, man. I know we've been talking about it, and it took a while, guys, to roll it out, and I know it's there's a lot of back end stuff we've got to get right. So thanks for your patience, and we're certainly looking forward to communicating and hanging out and getting some feedback.
Yeah, I mean, and again, an example of a mini-sode is kind of like we're talking about navigators. That could be a mini-sode, or you want to talk specifically about Thalax. That's an option of a topic you want to cover, for instance.
Jason would love that.
Jason would go nuts. I'm pretty sure he has a quarter chub right now just thinking about it.
I mean, I already stated my argument quite eloquently, I believe, last year at Nova.
That was an amazing counter argument. So if you guys don't, this is on the Remembrancers retreat. This is our backlog, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you guys are listening right now and you're sort of new to Remembrancers retreat or Heresy Grad School, go back and find our Nova 2018 episode. It is literally Jason and I taking counter arguments, counter opposing positions on whether or not the Mechanicum or the Legionis Astartes would have been better fits for conquering the galaxy, right? The Great Crusade. Am I saying that right, Jason?
Yeah, I think.
Who would be better at the compliance? Yeah, I think that's where it started. I tell you, listeners, it was fantastic. We were at the bar at Nova. We're in the Nova Foundation Lounge. If you guys ever get to go to Nova, go hang out there. I know plenty of us will be there. But, you know, Jason shows up in like this full suit, ready to rumble, like...
Yeah, it's because I'd been at the cellar soiree.
Oh, so
That's
good.
true, yeah.
Also, I'm a professional.
But no, it's a pretty fantastic episode. So if you guys have a chance, just I know it's in our list of episodes, so just go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I can argue how the Emperor is a turd who did everything wrong all day.
This is true.
But Jason's arguments in that episode are amazing because he literally goes down into like the physiology of a Thalax versus a Space Marine, and you should check it out. It's really good.
Thanks, Dave.
Replacement value and genetic enhancement, psycho indoctrination, like it's all there, guys. It's so good. Check it out.
Dave does a pretty good job actually convincing me that maybe the Emperor isn't a complete doofus. Maybe just like a partial doofus.
Oh, man, I'll tell you what. Listening to this like Black Legion stuff that ADB is writing, I'm telling you, man, like starting to rethink the whole Emperor thing. Like he may not be like on par with whatever is in the Immaterium. It's very interesting, right? It's very interesting. It's like ADB and Dan Abnett. Like Dan Abnett's been my go-to, right? He's the architect. It's really, really sort of like that's like he's my cornerstone, sort of to try to understand this whole thing. But man, does fucking Aaron Dembski-Bowden makes a very compelling argument for the Chaos Gods to be something much different than what I thought of. So.
Man knows what he's doing.
Oh,
Yeah.
He's deep in the warp, dude. I hope we get to read more from him.
We can only hope, you know. But I think that wraps it up for us. Plugs? Dave, you got anything?
No, thanks guys for listening. That's all I've got.
Yeah. Jason?
Still not sponsored by Coca-Cola, but
Hey, hopefully a Coca-Cola exec is really into the Heresy and stumbles across our podcast and says, hey, we can probably float these guys a couple $1,000 and they'll just promote us and everything, you know.
right. I mean, I drink so much Coke now for free. Like, I'd definitely do it for a sponsorship.
You know, I'll paint a unit of Marines as Coca-Cola Marines.
Oh, God.
Please don't.
That just makes me think of that one Monster Energy night. It's like doing a crazy like Gundam backflip with lasers.
Hey,
Ooh, boy.
that Monster Energy night won Capital Palette last year.
I bet it did.
Yeah.
But at what cost?
All of that OSL. Oh my god. But that's another story. Yeah. So thank you all so much for listening. Again, you know, think about being a patron. But otherwise, thank you again for listening. And as we say at the end of every episode, fuck off, Craig.
Fuck right off, Craig.
Good night.